I think there's 2 times the door to the subconscious mind opens up. When we wake up in the morning and we go to bed at night, and it's simple brain chemistry and simple physiology. We have a circadian rhythm. As soon as there's light, our body has been pretty much programmed that we begin to release serotonin and different chemicals that kind of wake us up. So our brain waves go from delta to theta to alpha to beta. And you kind of slide up this way, and then you're back to conscious awareness, local in space and time. When you go to bed at night, you go from beta to alpha to theta to delta, and you slide down. Now, if you're stressed, you can't stop thinking. You stay in beta. Your thinking actually is arousing the body because you're thinking about your problems. You can't slide down. Those 2 points in the day, when we wake up in the morning and go to bed at night, when alpha, where our analytical facilities are suppressed, we're in theta, we're in a hypnotic state. And the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open. And what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. So as you suppress analytical facilities, you can program anybody to do anything.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because I need it. I need it for me because I don't wake up every day and say, yes, let's go conquer the world. No, I wake up and I need that external motivation to match my internal motivation. When I see somebody who's doing amazing things, it makes me just want to play a bigger game. And so I hope that today's video makes you want to play a bigger game too, because your message matters, and let's get it out to the world. So today, let's open the door to our subconscious minds with Dr. Joe Dispenza. Enjoy.
What really happens for most people before they even reach for their cell phone, and by the way, the statistics are 86% of the people in the Western world, first thing they do is they reach for the cell phone and they connect to everything that's known.
And why is that a problem?
Well, I would never tell people how to think, but I would give them information to cause them to think. So the device is reminding them of things that are known. And every person, every object, everything, every place is mapped neurologically in our brain because we've experienced it. And then we have an emotion associated with our coworker, with our boss, with our ex, with our whoever. And so the moment we start responding, now we start feeling the same way. So now the environment is actually controlling the person's feelings and thoughts.
Yeah.
And anything that controls the way we feel and the way we think, we're victims to. So something's programming us to think and feel a certain way. There's nothing wrong with that. You should check your text and do whatever you need to do. But the first thing in the morning, if the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is open, why don't we program a new behavior? Why don't we rehearse a different way of being with our children, with our spouse, in our Zoom meetings, when we're alone, when we're in traffic? Is there a better way to evolve our experience? So if you're truly in the game of evolution, you're truly in the game, like one lifetime, one day. What am I working on today? Can I respond a different way to this person? Can I think this way instead of that way? Let me be conscious of my unconscious thoughts. Let me not be in a habit. Let me stay away from certain emotions. Let me practice feeling these emotions, see if I can maintain it. Now you're in the game. You're out of the bleachers and you're on the playing field. So it actually happens even before the cell phone. Because what most people do is they wake up and the first thing they do is the brain is a record of the past. They think of their problems. And those problems are just memories that are etched in the brain that are connected to certain people and objects at certain times and places. The moment they think of their problems, they're thinking in the past. Then when they think about their problems and they feel unhappy, now their body's in the past. And if you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, wow. And then the emotion that's associated is now the body's in the past because thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body. And how we think and how we feel creates our state of being. Now here's the problem. If you can't think greater than how you feel, and you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, and you understand that feelings and emotions are a record of the past, then you're thinking in the past, and your life will stay the same.
Rule number 2 is reframe your reality.
Being victimized by a circumstance in your life literally means that event, that circumstance, that person, that condition is actually causing you to feel emotionally and think in terms of memories equal to that circumstance. And that circumstance actually changes your state of being. So you're thinking the same way and you're feeling the same way and your response to the environment is the same. We can guarantee that your life is going to stay the same because you're the same. You ask that person, why are you unhappy? Why are you frustrated? Why are you sad? And they'll say this condition, this person is actually making me feel and think this way. Well, anything that makes us feel and think a certain way that we don't think we have any control over, for the most part, we're victims. So we're, as a species, become victimized by the conditions in our life. And it's the environment then that is controlling the way we feel and the way we think. So the idea is, if you can change the way you think and change the way you feel, could you begin to produce outcomes or effects in your life that cause you to believe that you're the creator of your life instead of the victim of your life, which means then you would have to think greater than that circumstance, and you would have to feel differently in the presence of that circumstance. And if you truly could, and begin to create an outcome, the synchronicity, the serendipity, the coincidence that happens in your life, you're going to pay attention to what you did, and you're going to realize that on some level you had a hand in that, that you were a participant in that. Our interest is to teach people how to reverse that process. Every person, every circumstance, every condition, every place, every object that you own is mapped neurologically in your brain. So your brain is a record of the past. It's an artifact, a repository of everything you've learned intellectually or experienced. End products of experience are called emotions. The memories that we have in our life produces familiar emotions, or our response to anybody that we know in our life. There's a neurological network for your boss, for your coworker, for your ex. And for most people, their interaction in the environment is causing their environment to control their thinking, or their personal reality is controlling their personality. So our interest is if your personality is made of how you think, how you act, and how you feel, is it possible if I begin to change the way I think, change the way I act, and change the way I feel, should my life change? Because I'm changing. And so the interest for us then is to be able to meet the challenges and conditions in our life from a greater level of consciousness, and not be victimized by those circumstances, but to take time and to review how you're going to think, how you're going to act, and how you're going to feel. That's meditation. And review how you're not going to think, how you're not going to act, and how you're not going to feel. It just turns out that tends to be 95% of who we are, is those unconscious programs. So it's so much easier to forget than to remember, because it's the majority of who we are, after a certain point in our life. So changing that process, the overcoming process of that same self, somehow begins to produce effects in people's lives. And that's kind of the exciting part about being a creator of your life.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there.
Rule number 3 is reinvent yourself.
I think the greatest relationship that you could ever have is with yourself. And taking time to be in the presence of yourself and ask yourself important questions like, are you happy? Who am I? And instead of getting up and getting on your cell phone and getting distracted, sit with your triple filtered water or a glass of wine or whatever you're into, JJ. Sit down and answer the question without being distracted. The contemplation process is the building process neurologically. And for me, I was just a guy. I'm a guy who loves God. I'm a guy who loves the divine. I'm a guy who loves mystery. I'm the guy who just never stops dovetailing information. That's just me. And I never really planned on doing any of this. My theories on life is make it up as you go along and take the value and run. And What the Bleep became a sensation. And all of a sudden, I went from a normal guy to being a rock star. And I was traveling around the world and doing conferences all over the place. And I reached this point where I realized that I wasn't living the work. And that really bothered me. I was disturbed by that. I was really uncomfortable. And when you get uncomfortable and nothing's making that discomfort go away, it's time to evolve. It's time to make a different choice. And I clearly heard in my head during one meditation, stop making the same choices and pause. I didn't know what that meant, except that I knew that I was relying on all of this external stimulation to build an identity that I really wasn't. And then I had to show up for people and look a certain way and act a certain way, and that wasn't me. And it got disturbing for me. And I had this gap between the way I appeared and the way I really was. And I didn't make time for myself and make time to be the example. I mean, my motive is always be the example of everything that I teach. If I'm not, I shouldn't be up here. I shouldn't be leading in my clinic if I don't live those principles myself, if I don't live my life that way. And so, you know, at the height of my popularity, I disappeared. I canceled all my events. My friends thought I was on crack or something. They thought I lost my mind. Because you know what? They were saying you could make so much money. And I said, I know how to make money. I really don't care about money. I really don't care. I care about how happy I'm going to be with myself. And I broke from the world for 6 months and retreated. And I really decided that if I presented myself back to the world, that I wasn't going to be seduced by it in the same way. That I really wanted to be the example of everything that I taught, and I wanted to lead events in a way that empowered people. I never wanted it to be about me. I wanted it to be about you.
Rule number 4 is embrace change.
The concept of transformation is a really important message, and we use meditation as the mechanism because I want people to become so familiar with their old personality self that they don't default anymore and keep reaffirming that new personality. It's so much easier to forget that vision than to remember it. So you got to constantly remind yourself, reproduce the same level of mind. You got to constantly emotionally embrace it. Keep conditioning the body, the thought and the feeling, the image and the emotion, the stimulus and response. You're conditioning your body into the future instead of waking up every morning and remembering your problems, and those problems are associated with people and objects and things at certain times and places, and every one of those problems has an emotion associated with it. So people are remembering their past and they're feeling the emotions. They're firing and wiring the same circuits and feeling the same emotion. They're conditioning their body into the past, and that's why change is so hard. Because the moment you step out from doing the same thing and making a different choice, there's going to be some discomfort because the body subconsciously has been programmed emotionally into the past. So the moment you make a different choice, you're stepping out of the known into the unknown. The body starts influencing the mind to return back to the familiar place. That's why people have difficulty changing. And yet, if meditation is the model to become so familiar with your old self and so familiar with your new self, how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That's the moment called change, okay? Give people the tools and let them practice, and they'll actually start enjoying it. Okay. But if you're not being defined by a vision of the future, I assert you're left with the memories of the past, and you'll be predictable in your life. So you wake up in the morning, you see your coworker, you see your husband, you see you're on a Zoom call, you're picking up your cell phone. For most people, it's the environment that's actually causing them to think and feel equal to everything that they know. So it's not their personality that's creating their personal reality. It's their personal reality that's reaffirming their personality. It's their environment that's controlling the way they feel and the way they think. Why? Because every person, your husband, your coworkers, your employees, your dog, your cell phone, every one of those things, you have a neurological network that you've actually created because you've experienced them. And because you've experienced them, you have an emotion associated with them. So if we're not being defined by a vision of the future, when we see the same people and we go to the same places and we do the exact same thing at the exact same time, the environment is controlling the way we feel and the way we think. But if how we think and how we feel actually creates our life, as long as we're thinking equal to everything that we know, everything stays the same because nothing changes in our life until we change. Okay, so the conditioning process, the thought and the feeling, the memory and the emotion, you're thinking in the past when you remember your problems, you feel the emotion associated with it. You're conditioning your body to become the mind of that emotion, and it's so objective, it's believing it's living the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and now you're headed in a very specific genetic outcome. Okay, you get up in the morning, you do the same thing as you did yesterday. You go through this whole routine, and you keep doing that. Your body's on autopilot now. And a habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through repetition. Habit is when you've done something so many times, the body actually knows now how to do it better than your conscious mind. That means your body is the mind that's dragging you into that predictable future based on what you did in the past, and you lost your free will to a set of programs.
Yep. And rule number 5, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is don't live in survival mode.
Now, what's your environment made of? Objects, things, places, bodies, people, right? So it's very material. Okay, so now, right, the arousal causes us to pay more attention to the outer world and less attention to our inner world. And this rush of chemicals causes us to become very preoccupied with trying to make that feeling of survival and stress go away. So time becomes very relevant as well. So now, your body is where you put your attention. Your environment is where you put your attention. And your attention is on time. Well, it turns out to change is actually to be greater than your body, to be greater than your environment, and be greater than time. So if people are spending the majority of their life with the emergency system switched on, it's not a time to create. It's not a time to learn. It's not a time to go within. It's not a time to meditate. It goes against the survival gene that says you will be prey. It's not a time to open your heart. It's not a time to commune. It's not even a time to eat.
Look at the last few years.
Yeah, so people spend the majority of their time shutting. Let me say it another way. So then, when a person is living in survival and they're trying to control and predict and change everything that's going on in their life, every person that they know, every object or thing that they own, every place that they know or have lived or go to, and everything they've experienced in their past, they're going to try to predict in their future. So now the arousal of stress hormones causes the brain to fire out of order because every person, every object, everything has a different neurological network in the brain. Now the brain is firing incoherently. And when it's firing incoherently, we're incoherent. At the same time, you're sitting in the Zoom meeting and it's not T-Rex, it's your coworker. And you're actually producing the same chemicals as if you're being chased by T-Rex, but you're not running. You're not fighting. You're not hiding. You're sitting there and those chemicals are running through the body and the heart is actually pumping really hard because it's turned on and it's got to run, fight, or hide. And you're sitting there and the heart is actually pumping against the closed system and the heart starts to become incoherent. And when incoherence takes place in the heart, the interference of waves actually causes energy to drop in the heart. So now you have no energy in the heart, you have no energy in the brain, and now the person is living in their animal self, in that animal nature, right? And so they're waiting for something to change in their outer world. They're waiting for something to change in their outer world to take away this feeling of fear or anxiety or frustration or impatience or resentment or pain or suffering or guilt or shame. And they're living by that emotional state, and they would rather cling to those memories and those emotions because at least it's the known, right? And it's survival. Why? Because in survival, the unknown, you better run from the unknown. There's better chances of survival. So nobody takes a chance, right? Okay, so then back to the 3D world then. The Newtonian world, the classical world of quantum physics is all about, Newtonian physics is all about the predictable, right? And we can shoot a rocket to the moon if we know the distance and the speed of the rocket. We can determine the time it's going to take to get there. So this three-dimensional reality is all about predictions, right? Okay, well, you can get what you want, but you got to work really hard and it's going to take a lot of time and energy. You can develop the skills to get it. Okay, now, so is there possibly another way to do it? I mean, okay, let's look at another way. Is there another way to actually do it in a shorter amount of time, to shorten the distance between the thought of what you want and the experience of having it, between the cause and the effect? From one point of consciousness, I'm here, and another point of consciousness, I want the experience of this here. Is there a way to do that? Okay, well, let's unpack the whole model of quantum physics. Okay, so you look at an atom. An atom is 99.99999% nothing. And I say nothing, I mean it's energy, it's nothing. It's a 0.0000001% physical and material. And it is a science. Yeah, that's what we're made of. And it's a scientific fact. It's the mathematics prove
that we're perceiving less than 1% of reality. Okay. So what we're perceiving then is the frequency of light, the wavelength of light coming off the sun, which is the rainbow, bouncing off of objects that give us the illusion of separation in three-dimensional reality. Okay. That's what we're seeing, right? We're seeing and experiencing the material world by light being projected onto it. Take away the light out of three-dimensional reality, you don't really have a whole lot of experience of it. You bump into a lot of things. I mean, take away all light. Okay. So the atom is both particle, material, and wave. And what's wave? What is wave? Frequency. What is frequency? Energy. What does frequency and energy do? They carry information. Yep. Okay. So the quantum field then is that invisible field of energy, of frequency that exists beyond our senses that we're not perceiving, but it still exists. Just because we're unaware of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Okay. So how much of your waking day, in your waking life, do you put your attention on matter? And how much of your waking day do you put your attention on frequency and energy? Well, throw in the hormones of stress, and your attention's on your body, on the environment and time. Where you place your attention is where you place your energy. So now all of your energy and attention is invested in this three-dimensional reality, and it appears really real because that's where our attention is. Believe in the thought I can't meditate, or I don't have enough time, or I'm a really important person, or I got too many emails to answer, or it's garbage day, or it's my mother's fault, it's my ex's fault. I want to complain, I want to blame, I want to make excuses, I want to lay down, my bladder's full, I like this, what am I doing wrong? They're agitated, impatient. That's the personality that has been hardwired and conditioned emotionally into the past that's resisting the unknown. It would rather cling to suffering than take a chance in possibilities. So our events, we say, okay, here's the knowledge, and I can say now with a great degree of certainty, more than ever, that if you actually do this and you stretch yourself a little bit further than where you would normally go at home, your brain will change. And if you teach people how to do this over and over again, and no different than training an animal. The body is the animal.
Are you training the body that you're in charge? Is that what you're doing?
You're telling the body it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind.
Yes.
And when you do that, those victories add up, and then all of a sudden, there's a liberation of energy. There goes the guilt, there goes the pain, there goes the whatever. It doesn't matter if it's health, it doesn't matter if it's wealth or success. It doesn't matter if it's a loving relationship, a change in a career, a mystical experience. Whatever it is, the person all of a sudden starts to relax into the present moment. I think we're reality-producing machines. I mean, there's no single individual on this planet who doesn't create reality unless they have a brain injury or something. But for the most part, most of us are engaged in reality, and we do cause effects. I think we reach a certain point in our life where we stop learning and we start feeling. And when we use feelings as a barometer for the unknown, it's contraindicated, because feelings are usually a record of a past experience. So we try to predict how that future event is going to be based on a feeling, and we always return back to the old self again. So I love the idea of how we can actually produce effects. I love the idea that every human being either lives in one of two states of mind. We either live in creation, which is growth and expansion, and it's health and homeostasis. The emotions of love and joy and trust make us feel connected to something bigger than us. Or we live in a state of survival, and a state of survival is living in stress. And living in stress is when your body is knocked out of balance. And the redundancy of that cycle over time, that imbalance that keeps happening, begins to break the body down. And I think the biggest problem for us, because of the size of our brains, is we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, and we do it all day long. And that continuous, redundant being out of balance over time, that imbalance becomes the new balance. And now we're headed for contraction and disease and feeling separate from the field and being selfish instead of selfless. We begin to live in a state of breakdown, in a state of disease and a lack of health. And so then those emotions then of those survival chemicals endorse the ego. And then we become more self-indulgent and more self-important and more self-serving because that's what those chemicals do. So we live in one of those two states of mind. Now, those chemicals tend to be highly addictive. So this is really good dinner conversation. We can talk about it, right? But actually breaking through, that's, I think, when you free yourself from the chains of those emotions that we memorize, when we actually break through, when we remove that mind out of the body, when we break the emotion that's trapped in physical flesh and the body's liberated, that's true self-love. That's true joy. It's the liberation of energy. So the anger that once was in there, the hatred that was once in there, the prejudice that was once in there is transformed, it's transmuted into joy. And it's the same energy, but it just has a different spin. And so no one can do that for you. You know, that isn't something where someone, you know, waves a wand and then it happens. You have to actually be willing to be uncomfortable as you break that addiction and be okay with it. And then the moment the body's liberated and you feel that expansion, that's the natural state of being. Now you say, I love myself so much because I went further than I thought I could go. I transcended some limitation about myself in the way I think, in the way I act, in the way I feel. That's the personality, that's the identity. Changing one of those things, really changing it, not just like changing your mind like I want vanilla ice cream instead of chocolate ice cream, but truly changing something that changes your neurology or neurocircuitry, changes the chemistry, which is your emotions that signal the gene that begins to change your very expression of health and the very expression of life. I'm talking about when you make that emphatic, you know, declaration where you make that change and it's undeniable. There's a biological, neurological, and quantum effect as a result of it. Well, I think I flirt primarily with the idea of how subjective mind has an effect on the objective world. You know, Newtonian physics is about cause and effect. It's about something outside of you fundamentally changing something inside of you. You know, we are an expression or a reflection of the environment. So as long as the environment is influencing how we're thinking and feeling, we can only be as great as the environment. So, and if we're thinking and feeling equal to the environment, we could only create more of the same environment. You know, the idea that we can change something inside of us, in our consciousness, in our thoughts, and in our feelings, and be able to memorize both neurologically in our brain and hardwire that information, install hardware, and condition the body emotionally to be a mind. So mind and body are working together. If we're able to maintain that modified state of being, then there should be some evidence outside of us. So instead of cause and effect, I always love the idea of causing effects, and to cause an effect. So the quantum model says you can cause an effect. And so I think where we get stuck with that is the idea that, you know, that it has to be predictable, that we should be able to know how it's going to happen. And that is, I think, our biggest error, because we can never control the outcome of the unpredictable. That's the quantum model. It has to be uncertain. It has to come in a way that we least expect, that surprises us, that leaves no doubt that what we did inside of us produced some effect outside of us. And when you begin to have those small synchronicities at first, and then they turn into larger and larger events, and you experience that awe and that wonder or that joy and appreciation for being alive, I think that's the natural state of being. I think that's having that kind of sensibility coming from within us instead of needing something outside of us to change our state. In a sense, then, it's not the personality that chooses the body or the parents, or it's the soul that chooses it. Does that make sense? Yes. But if a person gets caught in routine and gets lost in the quagmire of life, then the ego takes over and the soul is diminished. And now the person is doing their best to become a somebody, a someone, own something, be somewhere in some time. And of course, if that's the journey, and the person's not willing to find wisdom or look for truth, then they can play on that level for as long as they want until they're tired of it. And when they finally get bored with it, and they'll want to choose something else. And eternity is a long time, wouldn't you agree? So then the soul then says, okay, here's the options, probable lines of time. There are probable lines of time that are the more probable than others. And there is a probable line of time for living in the same body and raising your frequency to the point where you can go wherever you want with your body. That's the ultimate, yes or no? Yes. And you can whip bread out of nothing, and you can be in two places at once, and you can be on an alternate universe and have a whole life there, and you can be dimensional. That's the freedom of when you've mastered yourself and you've mastered the conditions. But most of us are headed in a certain timeline based on our genes and based on our own personal evolution. And that's what makes this time right now so powerful. This time right now is the age of information. And in the age of information, ignorance is actually a choice. And people are beginning to realize that I don't need a doctor to find out what my disease is. I don't need to go to the library or talk to my teacher. I can just find the information. And people are starting to wake up to greater understandings, and that is starting to become the collective. And that collective energy in the field, the collective consciousness, the collective awareness is changing the future of humanity. Yes or no? Yes. And at the same time, the past is crumbling. There is economic collapse, there's political collapse, there's religious collapse, there's environmental collapse, there's all of that is breaking down. Journalistic collapse. I mean, well, who watches the news and expects to hear the truth? I mean, it's just all falling apart, and it's becoming so obvious to people that all of a sudden they're realizing that the people that run the world or people that are in places of power are actually really, really worse off than you and I. And the only thing that has to happen is that we have to collectively become one mind. And when we collectively become one mind, we no longer are seduced by those things. And we are now like a flock of birds all moving in the same direction, and those fish all of a sudden moving as a school. Nobody's leading, everybody's leading. We're just connected. And what do you think we're doing when you tune in to the power of love in this room? Don't you know everybody dialing into that same frequency is causing that frequency to be in this room? And if everybody's doing it, it's getting more collimated, more coherent, more organized. And if you put your attention on it, there's more of it. So then when you're leading with your heart, that's enough. That's enough. So then when you have a collective mind, and people are moving in that way, and they're no longer reacting to politics or whatever, and they no longer need those things, you're catching somebody who's starting to awaken. Yes or no? Yes. And if you're focusing on the divine, and that's where all of your attention is, you won't see ethnicity. You won't see skin color. You won't see anything as separation. You'll just be like, wow, nice costume to the masquerade. I should have wore that. It's crazy because then people go get their genetics found out, and some of them just really have an intolerance to some culture, and they're 40% of that culture. So what makes this time for me so unique, and I'm speaking personally, is that there's such a quickening going on. More things are happening in a shorter amount of time. Would you agree? Yes. And if more things are happening in a shorter amount of time, it becomes more difficult to predict the next moment. This point we're reaching, this nodal point, is the point of unpredictability, and the old is collapsing. And the collapsing of the old should never be faced with fear, with bigotry, with anger, with hostility, with guilt, sadness, and shame, because that's how we've been controlled all along. And by the way, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but if you want to control people, manipulate their emotions. So as we move closer and closer to that point, the probability of us changing our life, the length of our life, not from low-stress foods and not from vitamins, all those things are good, matter to matter. But stress is going to downregulate the gene, consume the body's energy, And now that's going to begin to signal the gene to produce the disease that the person has inherited in the first place. Are you with me still? So when you react to someone or something and you're living by the same emotional state, you keep the same genes on, the same genes off, and that's your genetic destiny. And now the awakening of this, even if we changed little timelines just this week, we changed lines of time, you change something about yourself, you are going to walk into a different future that is your genetic timeline. And now you're bumped off course. You just got to be willing to stay in the unknown and be comfortable with it. And that's when you're at your greatest.
If people are not aware, how can they become aware? And once they become aware, what sort of things should they start to do to start making those changes?
Yeah, thank you for teasing that out. That's such a great question. You know, my interest is to give people the tools so that they have within their reach all the things they need to begin to apply and become scientists in their life. People don't know, if you don't know that those stress hormones are addictive, then you think they have power over you. If you don't think that you can change your thought, just because you have a thought, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And when the moment I realized that, I was free, right? And if you isolate yourself a lot and you're not out in the world because of whatever, you'll start to believe every thought that you think is the truth. And so that challenge then of saying, okay, I do truly want to be happy. I do truly want to be healthy. I do truly want to have a life that is really empowering, that I feel good about. Okay, well, let's take a look. Like, if no different than, well, you use the example of Tiger Woods. No different than Tiger Woods watching himself swing on a video, observing himself play. No different than a person who stands in front of an audience and does a lecture and watches them do the lecture. Nobody else will see what they see. They'll see themselves very differently than anybody else, and they'll see themselves do it, and they'll want to self-correct. They'll want to evolve their experience. Now, because we got this big frontal lobe, 40% of our entire brain, that's our conscience. That's the seat of our awareness. That's our creative center. When we ask the question, what would it be like to be in a different life or to be happy? If instead of getting on your cell phone, or instead of getting on your social media, or instead of turning on the TV, or instead of calling a friend, and instead of doing something to distract you from that possible answer, if you sat with it long enough and that creative center turned on, it would naturally scan the whole entire landscape of the brain, because it's the CEO, it's the symphony leader, it has connections to all parts of the brain. And it's going to look out over the landscape of the brain and look at the knowledge you've learned and the experiences that are stitched in your brain that are associated with what you know to answer that question. And as it calls up these different networks of neurons, once the brain fires in tandem, you get an image or a picture in your mind, and that's called intention. You see a new possibility, right? So then, this is why I am passionate about what we're doing. I never thought, Rangan, that I would see the kind of changes in people's physical health that I've seen in the last 2 years. Now, people do the best with what they think is available. If you don't know that this is possible, you are going to make the same choice. And that may be relying on some pharmaceutical, something outside of you, some therapy, whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. But if your response hasn't changed in your life, the efficacy of whatever you're doing is going to be diminished. Okay, so once I now know that people could heal from different health conditions, and there's evidence in the science and there's evidence in testimony, like the person that you just recited, that's one of many, many people that have had that experience. When they stand on the stage at our week-long retreats, and we call them up. Why do I call them up on the stage? Because they are speaking the truth. They are the example of truth. And I want people to become aware of that possibility. Why? Because if you're unaware of it, it doesn't exist for you. Consciousness is awareness, right? And so then with consciousness, you can't have consciousness without energy. So that thought of another possibility is a different energy. It's a different possibility. And so now, once you know it's possible, then, okay, now let's get down to stepping in the footprints that other people have left behind. Why? If you're telling the story of your past every single day and 50% of that isn't even the truth, then you're reliving a miserable life that you never even had. All for the reason to excuse yourself from change. Stop telling the story of your past and start telling the story of your future. Stop romancing your past and start romancing your future. Why not fall in love with your future as much as you've fallen in love with your past?
How many people in this audience actually believe in the idea that the way you think has some effect on your life? That your thoughts create your life. You believe that, yes? So how many people here actually woke up this morning and consciously created a future? You know, the biggest reason why people don't do it is because you don't really believe it's true. You see, if you knew on a gut level that it was absolutely true, would you ever miss a day? Come on. And would you ever let any thought slip by your awareness that you didn't want to experience? So your brain, according to neuroscience, is organized to reflect everything you know in your life. Your brain is a record of your environment. It's a record, an artifact of your past. So if you believe this, then does your environment control your thinking, or does your thinking control your environment? So if you wake up in the morning and you get out of bed on the same exact side as you did the day before, you shut the alarm clock off with the same finger, you slip into your favorite slippers, you shuffle into the bathroom and you use the toilet like you always do, then you walk over to the mirror and you look at yourself to remember who you are. Then you get into the shower and you wash yourself in the same routine way. Then you groom yourself to look like everybody expects you to look. Then you go downstairs and you drink coffee out of your favorite mug. Then you drive to work the same way as you did the day before. You see the same people that push the same emotional buttons. You do the exact thing that you know how to do and you memorize and can do so well that you're an expert at. Then you hurry up and rush home so you can hurry up and check your emails, so you could hurry up and go to bed, so you can hurry up and do it all over again. Now, here's my question. Did your brain change at all that day? We could say that you were thinking the same thoughts, performing the same actions that create the same experiences that produce the same emotions, but secretly expecting something to change in your life. Would you agree? Yes. So then, as the environment turns on different circuits in your brain, you begin to think equal to your environment. As you see the same people and go to the same places and do the same things at the same time, it's the external environment that's turning on different circuits in your brain, causing you to think equal to everything that you know. And as long as you think equal to everything that's familiar or known to you, what do you keep creating more of? Same life. Now, the quantum law is still applying to you. You're just thinking equal to everything that you know, and you keep creating more of the same. To change, to truly change, is to think greater than your environment. And every great person in history knew this, whether it was William Wallace or Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Queen Elizabeth I or Joan of Arc. They all had a vision. They all had an idea. Couldn't see it, couldn't smell it, couldn't taste it, couldn't feel it, but it was alive in their mind. It was so alive in their mind that they began to live as if that reality was actually happening now. So can you believe in a future that you can't see or experience with your senses yet, but you've thought about enough times in your mind that your brain is literally changed to look like the event has already happened? Neuroscience says it's absolutely possible.
You got to go out into life and try it out. Okay, I've changed my internal state. You could have a great meditation. You can connect, your heart could open. This happened to me. You could open your heart, you'd be amazing, you feel like the day is invincible. And you get up, and then the rest of your day, you're unconscious, the 15 hours of your day. So you're going to weigh 1 hour of being in a different state of being against 15 hours of you being unhappy and rushing and in a program. So then, how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That's called change. How many times do we have to go unconscious to the point where we no longer go unconscious and we stay conscious? That's the moment of change. Now, if you're truly out of the bleachers and you're on the playing field, and this happens to a lot of people in our work, they say, I really believe that this is the truth. I really believe that you could heal yourself. I really believe you could change your life. I've seen the testimonials. I just never believed that it could happen to me. Now, this is a big moment. Now you're really stepping on the playing field. So a person who starts doing their work, they're not interested in healing. The person who's truly interested in this work, they understand that the only way they can heal is that they have to change. They're not saying, I'm going to wait for my wealth or my healing to happen in order for me to feel grateful and be joyful in life. They're saying, if I feel grateful, my healing's going to begin, right? If I feel more whole, then there should be some change in my gene expression. So they've studied the content, they've studied the information, and now it becomes extremely practical. So they may have a great meditation, and we've seen this happen to many people. They sleep better, they have less pain, they have more energy, but their blood values never change. Now, they don't say, oh, I feel better, but I'm failing, this doesn't work. They say, what is it about me that's stopping this from completely healing? Okay, how am I in my waking day? The moment you begin to ask that question, you turn on the frontal lobe, and the frontal lobe is the seat of your conscience. Now, the moment you start looking at the end of your day, how did I do? This is such an important question. How did I do today? Did I fall from grace? When did I lose it? And who did I lose it with? If I had another opportunity, how would I do it differently? They'll tell you, I've seen them stand on the stage and tell their story and say, I had to start really watching myself in my life. How I was emotionally responding to my ex, how I was emotionally responding to my financial problems. I had to really, really pay attention to that. And that takes an enormous amount of energy and an enormous amount of awareness to stop the program, right? So you forget and you go, damn, I went unconscious there. Now, you didn't lose, you didn't fail. You just became conscious. Now, if you keep becoming so conscious of your unconscious states, you're outside the program. You're only in the program when you're unconscious. The moment you're conscious, you can objectify your subjective self. So you can see yourself through the eyes of someone else. So the learning process comes from the mistake. The brain learns by mistakes and surprises. I've made enough of them in my life. It's just whether you're going to do it again. You want to do it again, you're back in the habit, back in the routine. If you say, this is it, the next time that happens, I am not going to do that. Not for anybody else, but because those emotions actually, my response to that person or that circumstance is actually weakening the organism. Is that person, that circumstance worth it? So then it's evolution. It's evolution. The challenge then has to be met with a greater level of mind. Now, if you're just doing your meditation just because you want to please God or do the right thing or feel good about yourself, that's going to get stale after a while because it's just going to become another routine between your coffee and your shower and your emails and your drive to work, and people aren't present, right? So the familiar past, conditioning is based on the past, that thought and the feeling, but habituation is the programming them to predictable future. That's the known. So if you teach a person how to find the present moment, that's where the unknown exists. And that takes a lot of energy and a lot of awareness. And yet, if you practice it, the body literally will begin to respond to the mind. It's like training an animal. It finally relaxes. And when that occurs, your response to people and circumstances in your life will be different because you overcame yourself at the beginning of the day.
I believe that your personality creates your personal reality. And in order to change your personal reality, your life, it means then that on some level we have to change because nothing changes in our life unless we change. So if people understand that 90% of the thoughts that they think every day are the same thoughts as the day before, that's a fact. And the same thoughts always lead to the same choices. The same choices always lead to the same behaviors. The same behaviors create the same experiences. And the same experiences produce the very same feelings and emotions, and those same emotions influence our very same thoughts, and our biology, and our circuitry, and our chemistry, our hormones, our gene expression stays the same because we're the same. But the repetition of firing and wiring the same circuits in our brain in the same way causes us to create a very finite set of circuitry that becomes our identity and our personality. And nerve cells that fire together wire together, which means you keep doing it, it gets easier for them to fire and they run more automatically. So it turns out 95% of who we are by our midlife is a set of memorized behaviors, unconscious habits, hardwired thoughts and attitudes, conditioned emotions that are so familiar to us that it doesn't even feel like fear, or it doesn't feel like sadness. It's just who we are. So it usually takes crisis or trauma or disease or diagnosis or your lowest point in your life where you're knocked to your knees. And for that moment, you actually have a view of yourself outside of yourself. You can see yourself from a different state. The facade, the whole illusion is over. And that's when a person really begins to think about what they've been thinking about. They begin to notice how they speak or how they act. And I think they begin to pay attention to those feelings on a more regular and conscious basis. And the word meditation, I looked this up because when I started my journey, I'm very scientifically minded. The word meditation, the symbol means to become familiar with. So then the first step to change, if you wanted to create a new life, you have to change. To change your personal reality, you have to change your personality. And the first step is consciousness or becoming aware. So the moment you become conscious of your unconscious thoughts, the moment you become aware of your automatic reflexive habits and your emotional reactions, the moment you can become so conscious of those unconscious states of mind and body that you don't go unconscious again, so familiar with those states. And how many times do we have to forget or go unconscious till we no longer forget or go unconscious and we stay conscious? That's lighting a match in a dark place. And most people, when they do meditation, they actually think, when those voices come up and when the chatter starts and those emotions start, they actually think that they're doing their meditation wrong. And I want them to know that they're actually doing it right, because you're coming up against those thoughts that slip by your awareness unnoticed or unchecked by many people. You all of a sudden catch how you speak. And people say, if I really want to be happy, let's think about this. I don't want to complain. I don't want to blame. I don't want to make excuses. I don't want to feel sorry for myself. I'm going to stop that. Now, that's breaking a habit of being yourself. That takes a lot of energy and a lot of awareness. And our environment then, the circumstances, our environment are always available for us to think and feel equal to everything in our life, So the environment for many people, as we said earlier, controls the way they think and feel. So when they respond to their coworker, when they respond to the news, when they respond to the traffic in their life, that response causes them to return back to those unconscious programs. But sitting in a meditation and really sitting in the fire and believing that there's something on the other side of that thought, believing that there's something on the other side of some behavior or some emotion that makes us feel a certain way, that's stepping into the unknown. And it takes us disconnecting from the environment. That's what meditation is about. Playing music or hearing nothing, or closing your eyes and not eating, not smelling, not tasting, not feeling with your body. You're putting your body away and you're not letting it be the mind or the program. You're making it sit still. You're training the animal, right? And a person starts feeling emotional and they catch themselves starting to feel those emotions. Instead of letting that emotion drive certain thoughts or actions, that person settles the body down in the meditation and brings it back into the present moment, and that's a victory. If you study the neuroscience of culture, it's so unique, because we share the same biology, we share the same brain, and because we share the same biology and the same brain, we have certain universal traits that are unique to human beings. We smile when we're happy, we frown when we're sad, we sleep at night for the most part, we grab a stick with an opposing thumb. So structure and function are highly related, and those are universal traits. And then we have our individual traits, and that's kind of like how the brain is wired, right? That's like our fingerprint as opposed to our hand, right? So we have an individual series of traits and that make us unique, and we have our universal traits. But what bridges the universality of us and commonality as human beings with our individuality? And that's culture. And culture really is defined for the most part by the past. What has worked over generations or traditions that have sustained the culture based on one thing. And that one thing is environment. So a culture in northern Mongolia is certainly different than a culture in central Mexico because it's a different environment, and those different customs that are created from that environment allow that culture to sustain itself. So look at great people in history that changed the culture, whether it was Gandhi, whether it was William Wallace, whether it was Joan of Arc, whether it was Martin Luther King, whoever it was that changed the culture. What they did really well is they showed people that there was an alternative future that they could actually believe or perceive in their mind. Now, you can't see that future if you're living by the same emotions of the past. And for most people, they live by the emotions of the past. What you have to do is you got to get people out of their resting state. They have to become inspired. They have to become enthusiastic and theos, filled with God. They have to become motivated in some way. They have to be moved. And when they are moved emotionally, then that energy, that emotion causes them to see the same future as that leader sees. And when you get people seeing that same future and they have that clear intention, and you combine that with a different emotion, you're changing people's state of being. Now, get enough people doing that, and what happens is you get an emergent consciousness. An emergence in biology is such a phenomenal thing because when you see a group of birds or a flock of birds flying in the same direction or a school of fish moving together, they appear as a larger organism. When you study that principle in biology, you think that there's a leader that everybody's following, that it's a top-down phenomenon. In fact, it's not. It's a bottom-up phenomenon, and everybody's leading. Everybody's behaving in the same way, and the appearance of a larger organism becomes more sustainable for that species. So we have such a stigma in our minds that if you lead with too much passion, you're going to get it in the end, whether you're Jesus Christ or Abraham Lincoln or William Wallace, whoever it was. The outcome for truth is usually you lose your life. But the real question is, what if everybody's leading? You just can't take out everybody now. So this is a really important time because the emergent consciousness that has to take place has to be built on principles. And the principles that people can actually wrap their mind around, they have to keep their mind on it for a period of time where they're not distracted by technology. They're not distracted by TikTok, and they're not distracted by social media, and they're not distracted by the news. That the eminent condition of the world right now and the way things are going based on self-interests are all based on survival, and you can control people when you control their emotions. And when you control their emotions, you control their attention. And if you can capture a person's attention, you can capture their energy, because where you place your attention is where you place your energy. And so you could actually program people to do anything based on the emotion that they feel. And fear is a great emotion to cause people to rely on some authoritative figure to lead them away. So if there's a new consciousness that emerges that is based on not fruits and nuts, and not not on crystals, not on colonics, not on any of those things, but this is game time. This is where something else has to be born in human beings that is already innate in us, and that is the power to organize as a species. When we begin to heal one another, when we begin to inform one another, when we begin to respect one another, when we begin to shine for one another, when we begin to stand up for one another, when we begin to abilities and then demonstrate to people that there are other ways of doing things and share that right information, I think an emergent consciousness will actually take place. And God, I think this is the time in history more than ever where it matters the most.
When people, first thing they have to do is they have to overcome their survival states. They have to overcome their programs. They're going to be willing to sit with themselves long enough to wonder what's on the other side of I can't, or it's too hard, or I want to give up, or this sucks. What's on the other side of those thoughts? Those are just programmed thoughts. What's on the other side of this emotion called guilt or this emotion called frustration? What's on the other side of it, right? So you get people to a certain point, you give them a little bit of help, but the key then is we've done studies on this. If you close your eyes and you place your attention on your heart, it turns out where you place your attention is where you place your energy, right? So if you can put your attention on your heart and not your cell phone, and you can keep it on your heart and feel it and experience it and pay attention to it. By paying attention to your heart, you're actually giving it your energy. Now, your heart tends to feel different emotions than other parts of your body. And what emotions it loves to feel is love, compassion, care, kindness, gratitude, inspiration, freedom. These are elevated emotions. So if you could put your attention on your heart, we see from the technology that we built, in time, and not a very long amount of time, just a few minutes, you'll start to see this very low frequency of the heart start going up, which means the energy that's indigenous to the heart, what the heart uses only, you're actually feeding it. It's energy. So if you could do that then, and then you can slow your breathing down. When you slow your breathing down, you slow your brainwaves down. We've measured that thousands of times. So instead of this short breath or instead of this kind of shallow breath, you really work on taking long, slow breaths through your heart. Inhale with the intention of relaxing. Hold it with the intention of relaxing while you hold it. Exhale with the intention of relaxing. Blow all the air out. Hold it for a few seconds. You're not going to die. Relax again. Inhale again. And just do a series of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of these, depending on working with your body so that it starts to feel safe again. That's what it is. You slow your brain waves down, you slow your breathing down, you convert from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic, and that's what we see. Then all of a sudden we see the person's parasympathetic nervous system go up and the sympathetic goes down. What does that mean? They're moving out of stress. Okay, the body's moving into that state of growth and repair. Now put your attention on your heart. Now do something really cool. Amplify. That's the amplifier. That's the creative center. So what do you want to feel? Like, what emotion do you want to feel when a future experience happens? Whatever that is. Feel the gratitude, feel the joy, feel the freedom, and breathe and feel and breathe, and keep relaxing into your heart, keeping your attention nowhere else out of the millions of things you can put your attention on. That's your target. And you work with your body and you breathe and you feel, and as you start relaxing into your heart, you keep working on relaxing into your heart, and you feel it. You feel that emotion. There'll come a moment where that energy will naturally start moving up to the brain, and when that happens, the survival centers shut down. Brain moves into alpha. You see more in pictures and images. You could take it's like taking a sheet of paper, a sheet on a bed, and going like this. The heart sends this propagating wave right into the brain. Just follows, boom, right after the stroke volume, and it's telling the brain to be creative, to dream, to be unlimited. So the more you do that, here's the key. The more you do it, the more it becomes a skill. Now, when a person has a panic attack, right, what they do is they mismanage their attention. They picture the worst scenario that could possibly take place, and then they say, no, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? So they're making it actually 10 times worse, because if you prepare for the worst, there's always better chances of survival. The problem is they're combining that image in their mind, and they're actually living the experience emotionally. And so they're taking that thought and that feeling, that image and that emotion, that stimulus and response, and they're conditioning the body subconsciously to become the mind of fear. after a certain point, when the body's that out of balance, it will have a panic attack. Try as you may to control it with your conscious mind. You can't. You programmed it subconsciously, and then it gets worse because after that one, you can't anticipate when the next one's going to happen. So you start getting ready for the next one, and that's what exactly starts this cycle. Okay, so what we discovered that the more you relax into your heart and feel these elevated emotions, it's exactly like a panic attack. Only it's a love attack.
We have such great evidence to show that there's something very profound that happens when a person has a transcendental moment and they have an interaction with energy. When they hit those elegant states, they sometimes come to events as sick. We draw their blood at the beginning of their event, and we see what happens to their brain, we see what happens to their heart, and we know this person has had a profound moment, and we draw their blood and we measure everything afterwards. If we take the plasma of those individuals as an example, and we take a pseudovirus that looks just like SARS-CoV-2, or we actually take, now recently, we actually did the actual SARS virus, and we put that virus in the presence of that person, that advanced meditator that had that transcendental moment, there's a consistent resistance to the virus. The virus cannot enter the cell of that person. In people that are novice meditators, and they come to a week-long event, some of the virus enters their cell and some of the virus stays out. So there's somewhat of an immunity. In all the controls, they get infected. All right, so we know now that there's some agent, some cofactor in the blood when a person has this moment. So we've gone through some extensive scientific studies, and we actually isolated the very protein that stops the virus from entering the cell. And if we take that protein and we put it in the infected plasma of the controls, all of the infected controls become uninfected. Now, we're not getting that from anywhere out there. We're actually finding it in someone who has had a moment where they've interacted with oneness, with wholeness. And whether there's some change in energy in the blood and there's some proteins being released, but we're starting to discover there's some powerful agents when this occurs. Take the blood of that advanced meditator and take their plasma and put it in a uterine cancer cell. And the cancer cells, the mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cells, are switched on and they're pumping out a lot of energy. That's why they're almost immortal. If we take the blood of the advanced meditator and we subject it to a uterine cancer cell, 75% of the energy comes out of the mitochondria. It takes the wind out of the cells. Take the plasma of the same advanced meditator and put it on a neuron that has Alzheimer's and produces the amyloid protein, and there's a significant change in the gene expression of the Alzheimer gene. Take that person then and subject their blood to the variants, the lambda variant, the delta variant, the beta variant, and the same thing occurs. They're resistant to the virus. Now, what does that mean? Okay. If you really think about this, it would suggest that there's very dramatic environmental changes taking place from a scientific standpoint. Anybody who sees this kind of gene expression change or change in biology, they would say, oh my God, it suggests that there's a dramatic change in the environment. The problem is the person is sitting in a ballroom in a hotel. There's not a lot of things going on in a ballroom in a hotel. It's not a changing environment. Where is all that change coming from? Information from the field. So we have great testimony in our community of people that have reversed all kinds of things, and people have created all kinds of wealth and created all kinds of mystical moments. And we have really great evidence in our scientific studies, and evidence is the loudest voice. It is the voice that makes the biggest difference. So what kind of human being then, who has trained themselves to no longer be victim to their environment. If I said to you, Emilio, what's up with you today? And you say, oh, I'm sad because of this person or this circumstance. I would say, oh, you mean that person or that circumstance is controlling the way you feel and the way you think. Well, anything that's controlling the way you feel and the way you think, you're victim to. So then when things are good, you feel good. When things are bad, you feel bad, right? And if you feel bad, then you look for something out there to make this feeling go away. But then when the novelty or the event is over, here comes that feeling again, and you got to go chase something else. Well, the response for many people to their environment is actually weakening their body. The stress response, they react to some event, and their reaction to the event is actually weakening the organism. Now, short term, it's cool. All organisms can handle that. But the long-term effects of that just diminishes or taps the body's resources of vital energy. There's no energy to heal. There's no energy for growth and repair. So what we're suggesting is that when the person becomes less victim to their environment and realizing that they're more of the creator of their environment, and their response to the environment weakens them less because they know how to self-regulate and change, they'll be less susceptible to things in their environment, large or small. And creating a life that is meaningful for a person, someone as young as you, and you start seeing that you're actually creating it, every time you get feedback, a breadcrumb from the universe saying, Emilio, keep going, keep your head down, keep going, you're going to run into something big. All of those things are convincing you that you are not the victim to your life, that you're actually the creator of your life. And people who actually do this, it's not that you react. The question is how long you react. And teaching people how to move out of those states and back into homeostasis, back into balance by self-regulating with their eyes open, getting so good at doing it in their meditation with their eyes closed that they could actually do it with their eyes open in their life. Now it's a different game. So get enough people in the world becoming less reactive to their environment. They're less controlled by their environment. And the side effect of that is there's a huge change in our biology, huge. I could say right now with certainty, I can say that if people commit to, say, as an example, 7 days of an event that we do, I can say there will be so many biological changes that take place in their body. We have the evidence that says that. We have such profound hope for humanity in what we're discovering.
When the brain and the heart are coherent, my goodness, there's a feeling, well, you can call it the zone or whatever you want to call it, where just you feel like you have enough time to get things done, and no person, no circumstance is going to break you from your state, right? That zone or whatever you want to call that is actually teachable. So do you have to reach gamma to do that? No. Okay. We're just knowing that the people that hit gamma, they had an instantaneous biological upgrade. There's the eczema, 37 years of eczema, the next day it's gone. Back to your original question. We have great evidence in testimony, and we have great evidence in our scientific studies. And evidence is the loudest voice, and you can't tell me you're too old to do this. You can't tell me you're too sick to do this. I've seen people with 50 brain tumors that were emaciated, couldn't walk, couldn't speak on the stage, talking in front of an audience. Can't tell me you're too sick to do this. Now, if you examine that person, who comes to the event and there's no hope, you have 3 months to live, you have 6 months to live, and they're not accepting that or believing that or surrendering to that. They're actually saying there's got to be some other way. There's got to be some other way. If I created this, is it possible that I can uncreate it? So then the person who's on the stage telling that story, and it may have taken them 18 months, but they never missed a day. Why is that essential? Because there were days where they felt so bad in their body, so sick that they didn't feel like doing their meditation, but they did it anyway. There were days they had so much doubt because their condition was actually worsening and they could have succumbed to their doubt, but they did their meditation anyway. There were days that they were in such incredible fear because the doctor told them it was 3 months and it would be over, and it was the 3-month period. And they had every reason to not do their meditation, but they did it anyway. They could have said, I don't have enough time. I have kids. I got schedules. They found time to do it. And it was the overcoming that was the becoming process.
Becoming.
And when they became that person, what is the side effect of your own personal transformation? For example, most people, when they have a physical health condition, the moment they notice there's a change, like in pain, in something, in their sleep, whatever it is, there's some change, they make the connection right away. And that's when it's the dog on the bone. Now they're doing it twice a day, not because they have to, because that's their medicine. And I have sat with the scientists that have come to our events. I asked them to participate in a week-long event. And the one guy who's looking at the virus outside the cell, I said to him, well, how is this going to change? How is this going to change the way you do research? He said, this is my medicine. I've seen what it does. And people say, oh, are you saying meditation actually can cause your body to be resistant to viruses? I say, no. I'm not saying that. The data is saying that. I'm not. This is not what I'm saying. The data is actually saying that. So, what a great time in history to be alive, because you could be young. We have people that are 8 years old, 9 years old. We have usually about between 70 and 100 kids that come to our event that are under the age of 25 and under. We have kids that are 7, 8, 9 years old that participate all the way. I got down on my knees with one of these kids, and we were doing a specific meditation, and I leaned over and I said to him, "How was that?" And he said, "That felt really good." And why do I want that to be a normal feeling for him? Because I want to know who he's going to be. Yeah, we're changing his gene expression at that age, right? And so it's an amazing time. This is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. So my interest, to answer your question, is to demystify the process. No different than learning how to hit a golf ball. Everybody that has a skill that can do anything really well has done the exact same thing that I'm talking about. There's nothing different about it.
Living in stress is living in survival. And survival is a very primitive mechanism that allows us to really, really adapt to an environment that's threatening or dangerous. The moment you perceive a danger or threat, you switch on an autonomic function in your body, the sympathetic nervous system, and there's an arousal. The arousal of those hormones causes a heightening of the senses, because now we want to become more acute that there's a danger there. If there's a tiger in the bushes and you hear something rumbling around and it's night, you're going to either run, fight, or freeze or hide. That's your choices. And so that works really well in survival for the short term, because the arousal causes us feeling like we're more our body. We get a rush of energy. The arousal causes our brain waves to change and to move into a more alert state. We narrow our focus on what it is in the environment. We're giving it our attention, all of our attention. And now we're trying to predict what's going to happen in the future based on what we've known in the past. So we're overlaying a known into the future so that we can prepare. And normally when we don't know what it is, the unknown causes us to feel these primitive emotions of survival, and it's best to run. It's best to fear the unknown. So the challenge becomes that works really well for the short term. But when you switch on this system and you're mobilizing enormous amounts of the body's energy and resources for some threat in your outer world, there's no energy in your inner world for growth and repair. There's no energy for long-term building projects. And we start tapping the body's vital resources, and that's what creates mental health or physical health or spiritual disease, right? So because no organism can live in that emergency state for that extended period of time. It's like if there's a hurricane coming through Australia, you're not going to be thinking about remodeling your kitchen at that time. It's not a time for long-term projects, right? So now when we're in stress and we're in survival, the self is the most important. You don't trust. It's not a time to love. It's not a time to learn. It's not a time to communicate. It's not a time to be vulnerable. It's not a time to open your heart. It's not the time to sit down and close your eyes and go within. You would be eaten. The survival gene is switched on, and people spend 70% of their time living in this state. So then in that state where the arousal takes place, the brain moves into a heightened brainwave pattern called beta brainwave pattern. Now, as I said, that's like driving your sports car in first gear on the freeway. It's the jump start, but you can't do it for a long period of time because in stress is signaled by the loss of control, not being able to predict the next moment, the unknown, or the perception that something's going to get worse. And when you're in that state, you start trying to control and predict everything in your life, and you shift your attention from one person, to another problem, to another thing, to another place, to another object, to a group of situations. And every one of those elements has a neurological network in the brain. So the arousal causes the brain, like a lightning storm in the clouds, to start firing out of order. It starts firing incoherently. And when the brain is incoherent, we're incoherent. When the brain isn't working right, we're not working right. So then now the person is aroused in that state. It's never occurred to them that they could change that. In fact, they're telling you, I am this way because of my boss, because of my ex, because of my past, because of the news, because of the global situation, whatever it is. And what they're really saying is, I'm using something in my outer environment to validate or justify why I feel this way. So then that means then they're also going to be dependent on something in their outer environment to make them feel better. And whether it's a drug or a treatment or whatever it is, complaining, whatever it is that makes them feel better. And the moment they notice that they've done something and they've used something outside of them to make that feeling go away, they'll pay attention to what it was. And every time they feel that feeling, they'll become dependent on it. So now they're more dependent on their environment. So then the subconscious program is, when things are good, you feel good. But when things are bad, you feel bad. So you're completely victim to your environment. And the environment is actually controlling the way you feel and think. Mm-hmm. Now, anything that controls the way you feel and think, you're victim too. So I say, Glenn, why are you in such a bad mood? Well, I'm in this bad mood because of this person, this circumstance, this situation in my life. What you're really saying is, something in my outer environment is literally controlling my feelings, my emotions, and my thoughts. So then it turns out that when the person is in that state and they're in that aroused state, their heart is beating because the sympathetic nervous system switched on, but they're not running. They're not fighting. They're not hiding. They're stepping on the gas pedal and they're stepping on the brake. And the heart starts beating very incoherently. And incoherent waves in the brain and incoherent waves in the heart diminish energy. So energy goes out of the brain. Energy goes out of the heart. We stop thinking clearly. We stop rationalizing very well. We can't plan for the future. We're uninspired. In our heart, we don't trust. We can't feel gratitude. We can't feel appreciation. We can't feel love. It's not a time to feel any of those things. So then that's the beginning of disease, right? So the person starts thinking about their problems and they turn on that stress response just by thought alone. And if the hormones of stress push the genetic buttons that create disease, then your thoughts are going to make you sick. Mm-hmm. And the question is, if your thoughts can make you sick, is it possible that your thoughts can make you well? And by the same means, if you're using every person, every circumstance in your life to reaffirm that dependency on that rush of emotions, then you become addicted to the life you don't even like. That's why change is so hard, because you'd rather suffer and be in pain than take a chance in the unknown, because the unknown, you can't predict it. So people cling to the familiar and cling to the known, and so they become dependent on the environment. So what we found out was, is there a way to make the brain more coherent? Is there a formula that we can teach people? Instead of narrowing their focus on the material world, narrowing their focus on everything known, what if they broaden their focus and they put it on nothing, on space? If they broaden their focus and they open their awareness in this way, what happens to the brain? And we found the brain gets really organized. What if they traded fear for an elevated emotion, and we taught them how to start working with their body? First of all, mothering is as I said, is the hardest job in the world. And
I raised three children, and I practiced raising them within many of these principles. And with children, number one thing is they have mirror neurons, and mirror neurons are called empathy neurons. They model behavior. When a lioness is teaching her cubs how to hunt, she's not on a chalkboard and saying, you go here, you go there. She's saying, watch me do this. And when the cubs watch the lioness hunt, as they're looking at their mom hunting, they're priming the very circuits in their brain to hunt. As they watch their mom, they're becoming their mom hunting. And the mother's act is selecting and instructing circuitry in their brain equal to the environment that they're perceiving. So what does that mean to an adult or a human being? You got to be the example of everything you want your children to be. That's the fast path to enlightenment. So you can't tell your kids, get off your technology while you're over there on the computer or on the phone or on the TV, and expect them to find something to do if you're not engaging. It's important to have technology, but it's also important to not have technology, and that's healthy as well. So one of the cool things that's happened in our community is we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids that come to our week-long events from the age of 7 or 6 all the way up to 25 and 26, and sometimes there's 200 on the stage, and the children are interested in understanding that they can create a better life. And so there's certain principles, I think, that really help parents. And of course, another one is never try to reason with your children when they're emotional. Because we don't want to be reasoned with when we're emotional. We want to be left alone until we get through the emotion, because no information could actually enter their brain that isn't equal to that emotional state. Now, one of the most important things that I think you can teach a child by demonstration, as well as story, allegory, and conversation, is to teach them how to shorten the refractory period of their emotional responses. So, as I said, you react to or respond to something or some condition in your outer world that changes your emotional state. It could create fear, it could create anger, it could create jealousy, hostility, envy, whatever. And so then the lingering of that emotion, that chemical, if you allow it to last for days to weeks, it's called a mood. If it lasts for weeks and weeks, 2 months on end, that's called a temperament. Oh, he's an angry temperament. Why are you angry? I'm angry because of this experience. If you keep the same emotion going on for years on end, that's called a personality trait. So personality traits many times are created by the experiences and the emotions that keep us connected to the past. Teaching children how to shorten their emotional reactions is so vitally important, because when we're in that emotional state, there's a gap between the way things appear and the way things really are. We're altered. We're not ourselves. And if we act during that time, if we send an email during that time, if we speak during that time, even if we think during that time, and we follow through, we'll normally say, I should have never said that. I should have never thought that. I never should have sent that email. I should have never done it. So children then are so neuroplastic. It's so important for you to have conversations with them about how hard it is to overcome our emotional states when we're in the emotional state. As an example, with my daughter, my kids, whenever I saw her react to someone or something, whatever I was doing, as long as there was no injury or no one was in danger, I would stop and I'd turn around and I would observe her just for a minute while she was doing what she was reacting to, and she became aware that I was observing her. After she became aware that I was observing her, then I would deal with it however I had to deal with it. At the end of the day,
I would lay down with my children in bed and I would start to talk about myself. God, I had a pretty tough day today. I lost it right around 3 o'clock. I couldn't get back the entire day. I was frustrated and I was impatient. I had too many things going on. I was overwhelmed and I wasn't present with you guys at dinner. I don't know, making something up. If you just pause for a moment, my daughter would say, yeah, I got really angry at Paris today. And I'd say, I know, I saw you. And then she'd say, yeah. And she'd start telling me what happened. And I'd say, okay, now that you know what happened, if it happened again, how would you do it differently? How would you behave differently? How would you evolve your experience? And then we would talk about it. And between her and I, we would come up with another plan, another rehearsal. We would begin to, okay, okay, so Paris comes in, she says, and you do this instead. And so before you go to bed at night, your subconscious mind is wide open to information. And so I would rehearse it with her before she would go to sleep, while everybody was in bed. And I would then tell a story of these kids that lived in a faraway land. And then I would bring in each kid's little allegory about them and what they were working on changing to give them an opportunity that they could evolve their experience.
Because you made it this far in a video, I want to celebrate you. Most people start and don't finish. Most people never actually follow through. Most people say they want something, but they don't ever do the work to actually get it. But you are different. You are special. Believe Nation, you made it here all the way to the end, and I love you. So as a special celebration, if you put a hashtag believe down in the comments below on this video, I will showcase you and celebrate you somewhere on the screen in a future video because you are awesome.
For 3 hours of pure Joe Dispenza inspiration, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
And instead of getting up and getting on your cell phone and getting distracted, sit with your triple filtered water or a glass of wine or whatever you're into. The question without being distracted, the contemplation process is the building process neurologically.